أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to everyone. Aisha, as somebody who has been on this fantastic journey that Allah has blessed you with, I would like you to make a dua for us, the opening dua for us.
Salie, you as the man, I honor you rather, inshallah.
No, I, even if it's a very short dua, Aisha, with your barakah, I'm asking that you actually open tonight's session for us with a short dua. Bismillah.
Allahu Akbar. Is it okay if I just say Surah Fatih?
Anything that is, in fact, the best thing you can do. It's the one thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that was not given to any other ummah. So alhamdulillah, tafaddal. Bismillah.
The barakah Surah Fatiha, where Allah would bless this and give us guidance for this dua, inshallah.
Ameen.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Amin. Bismillah.
Alhamdulillah, shukran jazilan. Aisha, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your dua and that we actually benefit from the barakah that you're bringing to this occasion for us, having been on this holy journey and coming back to us with all the barakah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let all of us benefit from this, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen.
I just returned yesterday from Egypt. Desert.
Oh, mashallah. I hope you went to the dead city, to Atayla Askandri.
I went to Imam Hussein radiallahu anhu's qubur.
Subhanallah.
Imam Shafi.
Subhanallah.
It was really amazing. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. In fact, next time you go to Egypt, you must go to Atayla Askandari. May Allah be pleased with him to his maqam. But alhamdulillah, shukran. It's great to have you back, Aisha, and everyone else. Welcome. Tonight, without any further delay, I think what we're going to do, we're immediately going to go to the beginning of our first session. Now, just as a reminder, what we are doing in the series of ours, we're talking about Tawhid, and Tawhid is the subject of discussing essentially the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, oneness, if we talk about oneness of Allah, then we must understand, what did I do now? Did I now, subhanallah, what did I do now? Oh, yes, back here. Oh, yes, there's it. If we talk about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's something that must be understood correctly. One, as we know one, it is part of the numerical system. One is a number among so many other. When we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's oneness, we're not talking about the number one amongst many other numbers. We're talking about the uniqueness, the incomparability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what does that actually mean? Now, Tawhid unpacks all of these details for us. So when we talk about oneness, we will go into more detail about it. When we say monotheism, we've been through this. I'm going to repeat it. Mono comes from the word one, and theism is belief, the belief in one. Now we single Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out alone for all forms of worship. Mind, body, and soul, they say, or inward and outward, and in any way that we can through our actions, in our speech. And it is something that we, in fact, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only with our body, but with our ruh, with our spirits, with our soul. And we say, when we talk about belief and worship in Allah, that no one else is worthy of being worshipped. And all our worship we direct only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and nothing else in creation. When somebody asked in the early period in Makkah, with the advent of Islam, one of the non-believers came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "What is the lineage of your Lord?" And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not reply until Jibreel came with the revelation of Surah Al-Ikhlas, Qul Huwallahu Ahad. Say, He is Allah the One, Allah the self-sufficient Master. He begets not, nor was He begotten, and there is none equal or comparable unto Him. I think we've all been through this. In fact, at some stage, if Allah allows, we should have a complete series just on this surah, because everyone knows it. But there is so much depth and meaning to it that we often lose the full benefit of it. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to his Sahaba at the time, if you want to recite 1/3 of the Quran before you go sleep, then recite Surah Al-Ikhlas. So this, the benefit and the elevated status of this particular surah is way beyond what many of us understand. And we should keep this in mind so that when we do recite it after we've been through some of this, it should actually have a new meaning for all of us. Because when we say our kalima, and we say it all the time in the salah, we say it when we wake up, when we go sleep, and during the day, that with the oneness of Allah, we proclaim, we testify, we acknowledge the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every time we utter the shahada, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the subject of Tawhid refers to that oneness. It teaches us how to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially in relation to the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attributes, the names, and the actions. Now we're going to try and deal with all of these individually, because how are we going to understand that the unity applies to all 4 of these things that we have listed here? And if we don't understand it, how can we truly know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So although it sounds like we're going through detailed explanations of these things, it actually lays a solid foundation of hopefully what will follow here after, inshallah. Now, there are certain things that must be applied to Allah, and there are certain things that can never be applied to Allah. So the essential things, what is wajib, what must be, what we must use to describe Allah with, and the things that we can never assign to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we must know that things. Because otherwise what will happen is we are going to, without us even knowing, we're going to fall in the trap of going against these very things because we don't understand our Tawhid. We don't realize that we're actually assigning certain things that's unbefitting to Allah, or we are claiming or assigning things to ourselves and other people that actually belongs only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So knowing and understanding the essence, the attributes, the names and the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absolutely crucial. Now let's go to the first one, the definitions of what actually is the essence, the Dhaat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now let me first say, the essence is not a description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not an attribute. It refers to the actual divine being itself. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not visible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not also been created. But because of that, we must know that our minds, with our physical senses together, our intellect, as great as it is one of the most majestic things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created within the entire creation. Allah was extremely pleased with the intellect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. But even with that, we must know that the essence, the actual divine being itself, is completely unknowable and indescribable to anyone or anything. Now the divine being itself, Allah, that's the name of that divine being. Does not exist, itself exists. What does self-exist mean? Exist means it exists, it is. But it is not dependent on any external force or trigger. Itself exists by itself. It's completely and utterly independent. That is the supreme, all-powerful, eternal being that we are talking about. And because Allah is unknowable with the mind and the five senses, we are warned not to, as much as we want to know Allah, that is the one area that's off limits to us. Because it is a road that once you travel that road, it has absolutely no end to it, and it's unknowable stuff. Things that the mind has been designed to be able to do certain things, but it has its limitations. The mind has not been created as an entity that can ever know the divine essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Must please remember that. So when you ask, what is Allah, meaning the actual divine being, describe the divine being, then our answer should be, that is off limits, it's unknowable, indescribable to anyone or anything. So never scratch in that part. We've been warned it's a dark, deep well from which there is no return. And you can even lose your iman if you want to know more about that. But Allah has made it easy for us. So that is off limits, but Allah has given us all the other things of how we actually can get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the essence refers to the self. And we'll speak more about it later on. But it's the actual divine being and the name by which that divine being is known. The actual name is Allah. And Allah is not the description, it's the name that belongs to the essence. We're going to leave it like that for now. But remember the points that we've made when we go deeper into the issues later on. Now, what is a SIFAAT? SIFAAT is an attribute. Now, attribute if you look it up in the dictionary, you will find certain meanings and descriptions. Be careful what you take out of there, but it is basically a description of that divine entity that we spoke about earlier, but it is not referring to what the divine entity is actually. It just describes some of the characteristics and qualities that belong to the divine being. So that is a sifat. It's a description of a quality, a characteristic, or an ability of the divine being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, here comes a very difficult concept to understand. So, the names and the attributes cannot be said that that is Allah. Because who is Allah? Allah is the divine being. The names and the attributes are merely descriptions. But those descriptions cannot exist or be separated from the actual divine being itself. Let's be clear about this, because it's now going to become difficult. The path is going to become not easy. You're going to have to stretch your minds, and I want you to ask questions, please. Please, please, please ask questions. It will help me also. So one can never say the names and the attributes, the sifat, and the names of Allah is Allah. You can't say that. We're talking Tawhid now. There's other things that will come up later on, but we'll come to that. But the names and the sifat cannot be said to be Allah. So if it's not Allah, what the people of Tasawwuf has taught us, neither are they other than Allah. What is other than Allah? What is other than Allah? I'm putting that question up there. I know it's early on, but let me put up the question. When we say it is something is other than Allah, what are we actually saying? I'm going to open the floor quickly.
Is it anything that had been created is other than Allah?
Are you asking or are you saying?
I'm suggesting that.
Okay. All right. So your description, Sister Warda, is that it is something that's been created. That's exactly it.
Yes.
That is exactly it. Allah is the creator of everything. If we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of everything, and Allah's existence is one, nothing exists next to Allah, then what is not Allah must therefore be what has been created by Allah. Are we clear about that? And if you're not clear, ponder on it, because this term other than Allah should be understood that which is creation. But when we say the names is not Allah, the names and the sifat, the descriptions of Allah, is not Allah, but it is not creation. Because those names belong only to Allah. If you have a question around this, I'd welcome for you, and be pleased if you actually raise it when we open the floor for questions. And just to emphasize it so that it's recorded as part of the record of what we have discussed, that which is other than Allah must be creation. But the names and the attributes of Allah does not belong to creation. It only belongs to Allah, even though it's not Allah. It's a description of Allah and nothing else. Subhanallah. Now what, just so that, because we're going to spend time on the sifat, in fact, if you look at what is the essence of what we are trying to do, when we talk about the attributes and the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, almost all of us, well, I would probably say all of us, did the 20 sifat that's wajib for Allah and the 20 sifat that's impossible for Allah. As young children, we could recite it, but not necessarily have the proper understanding, because we didn't go through the actual meaning of what is a sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we understand what is a sifat? And here I've gone to extract from the English dictionary so that it can assist us in first understanding what is the sifat or an attribute of Allah. Now, attribute in the English language describes specific qualities or aspects or features of that which is being described. It could also be something that you describe that is generally or almost always associated with that thing that we are describing. So through the describing the attitude, the attributes, we get to know what that something is. This is still part of the definition, the way it appears in the English language dictionaries. It could be a unique or distinctive sign belonging to a person or objects, which serves to identify or describe them.
The screen is not saved, is not shared.
Oh, my apologies. Is it shared now?
Shukran, yes.
Okay. So when we, but it's not
maximized.
It's not maximized. Daar gaat ek alweer nou on a stop share. Allah, share screen. Okay, it must be this one. That's maximized now, is it?
Yes, shukran.
Alhamdulillah. In fact, when I'm done here, I'm going to also see if I can have Zoom lessons on how to do PowerPoints. A unique or distinctive sign that belongs to a person or object. Now, that unique sign or quality assists you to know what is being described. I'll come to some examples about that. But it could also be an action or an ability which is associated with that particular thing that's being described. This is all what the dictionary tells us if you talk about an attribute. Now, to give an example, just so that we become clear, we're talking about worldly examples now. Please be clear about this. We're not coming to the actual topic of Tawhid itself and how this should be understood in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Example of what an attribute means. A tree has branches and leaves. That's an obvious known fact. Now, branches and leaves are descriptions of the tree. But can we say branches are trees or leaves are trees? Do branches and trees exist independently of the tree? They do not exist independently of the tree. I was almost going to fall in the trap. Well, in this case, it is so. In this instance, and it's not the same when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in this instance, the tree is composed of branches and leaves, and together they form what is referred to as a tree. An attribute can also be used to negate certain qualities, to refute or disallow or deny certain qualities about something. You use the opposite. That man is not stingy. The man is not stingy. If he's not stingy, in this instance, we are saying the man is the opposite of stingy. In other words, he is generous. So in both instances, negating a certain thing to prove the opposite or to illustrate the opposite is one of the ways that we can use an attribute by using the method of negating certain qualities. Now it's compulsory, it's wajib for us as believers to know all the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, yes, it's a start to get to know the actual sifat and to be able to verbally recite them. But the reason why it's a compulsion to know the sifat of Allah, because if you don't know the sifat of Allah, the way Allah has described himself to us, Allah, the owner of these sifats, described those sifats to us, told us, these are my sifat. So if you want to know Allah and you can't see Allah, then you must know how important the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Because Allah says that those are the sifat, the attributes that belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why as believers, we are compelled to know and make effort to understand what these sifats are. Now there are 20 of them, the 20 sifat that must be belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the opposite of that would be what is never possible. It's almost vanzelfsprekend, it's almost obvious that if those are the essential, then the opposite of the essential must be that it's not possible. And we have to know all of them. Now, those sifat that are wajib must all be present. Even if just one is lacking. Say, for example, we go through the 20 sifat and we get to number 19 or number 20 itself, and then we come to one that we say, no, Allah is not this, or this doesn't belong to Allah. Then that, what you are describing, cannot be Allah. All 20 must be present, all of them, not one can be lacking at any point in time. And of course, as I mentioned, the 20 which can never be associated or be applied to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the opposites of those sifats that are absolutely necessary to describe Allah with. Then there is an additional one, and that is Allah can do as He pleases. You must accept Allah has the right to do as He please or not to do as He please. That's up to Allah. Allah has the right as the owner and creator of this universe. That is an attribute that stands completely on its own. So because Allah is not known through the normal way that we know things in the material world, through our brains and our five senses, the way that Allah has made it possible for us is that we must seek knowledge so that we can understand what His divine attributes, names, and actions are. The reason why I didn't mention actions earlier, because that is something that must be understood correctly. But all of them belong to Allah. The essence, the actions, the attributes, the names, all belong to Allah. and they cannot be separated from Allah. If one of them are separated from Allah, then you are not talking about Allah. They're indivisible, they're inseparable. Now we've had some idea now of what is an attribute and what is the essence. Very briefly, let us just touch on what are the divine names. And we said that these are the names. We're talking about now what we know as the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've made this point over and over, but let's repeat it. Allah is utterly perfect with no boundaries and no limitations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have a specific number of names. Perfection means there is no limit. But Allah has given us 99 names so that we can know Allah in terms of where we find ourselves in this world. We are not creatures or a species that has been given knowledge of the unknown, of the ghaib. So Allah has given us what is sufficient for us to know Allah. And those are the 99 names. Now, are the names the same as the sifat? At times, yes. And at times, it gives a specific understanding of one of the sifat. But the names can be the same, and at times, one name can apply to two sifat, or one sifat can apply to several names. We'll touch on that. But it's more specific than the general understanding of the sifat is the general one, and the more specific one are the 99 names. Now the name of the essence, the divine entity itself, the one in whom we believe is Allah. Now the name Allah encompasses all the divine names, known and unknown. There are thousands and thousands of names, some of which are known to the awliya and the salihin, that Allah has not made known at a general level, but where they have been given knowledge of these names. But all of them fall under the umbrella of the one name that encapsulates and encompasses every single name, known and unknown. What we have to remember, though, is that these names, like the sifat, do not exist in their own right independently. There's Allah, and there's a name, Al-Khaliq, Al-Bari, Al-Musawwir, Al-Razak, you name it. These names cannot exist independently. The names all belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and only to Allah. Remember this point, the oneness that we are speaking about. When we speak about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it means the way Allah is described and the qualities and abilities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, none other can be described with these qualities. We'll come to some of the other points. Yeah, but human beings also create. Allah is creator, but human beings also create. We'll come to some of that later to clarify that. But for now, we must understand when we talk about the divine names belong to Allah exclusively, and no one else can be described with those names. And Allah confirms. The most beautiful names belong to Allah, so call on Him by them. We must be careful that we interpret this correctly. So does it mean that we cannot call Allah and say, Ya Mujib, the one who responds? When you make dua, you say, Ya Mujib, Ya Mujib. The one who responds, Ya Mujib, can you do that? Yes, Allah says so in the Quran. Because you are referring to that specific ability and quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't only say, Ya Qadir, the one who is all powerful. You are making it more specific. You are saying the one who responds. So when you call on Allah by these beautiful names, you must just understand that that particular name does not exist independently of the one to whom it belongs. I hope that point is clear. Whoa. And I'm going to throw up a question at the end of this. What are the divine actions of Allah? When we say divine actions, it means what is it that Allah does? These are the things that we see, some of it we see, not all, very little in fact, but we see how these names are expressed and reflected or manifested in creation. For example, Al-Khaliq, the creator, who created this, that is a reflection of how the names manifest, and when the names manifest, that results in action. Creation is created. So the act of creating is an action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now comes a difficult question. Can we say the divine actions is Allah? No. Because the divine actions describe what Allah does. But it manifests in creation as material things, things that's tangible that we can engage with our minds and our five senses. So that which Allah has created is a divine action. The act of creating is divine. What results from it is creation. So you can't say the action is Allah. But can you say the action is not Allah? You can't. Because that particular action belongs only to Allah. The action itself, the act of creating, is not creation. It results in creation, but it is not creation. So divine actions belongs to Allah, but we cannot say divine actions is other than Allah. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean? The human beings, the trees, the mountains, the sea, the sky, all of that. What are they? What our sister Warda said earlier is that other than Allah means that which Allah has created. So how would you describe that the divine actions is other than Allah if it results in creation? How would you explain that? I'm going to open the floor on that point. I know it's a deep, heavy question, but let's hear if you have a view on it. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. I'm opening the floor quickly.
The creation is done only by Allah, not by us, not by man. So therefore it's divine.
So is the creation other than Allah?
The action of creating that is divine. The result of that, the Salie is asking about the action, the act of creating.
Yes.
That is divine, not the result, yeah, but the act of creating.
And the result is?
That would be other than Allah.
Which is creation. Alhamdulillah. Shukran. We should all go on Umrah so Allah can open our hearts and our minds for us. That is exactly it. The act of creating belongs solely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that act, we cannot say that act is Allah. That is a description of the divine entity, the one who is able to create. But what results from the action is creation. Alhamdulillah. If you have another question, then please follow up when we open up the floor again. What we must please remember, and we're going to repeat this when we deal with the actual SIFAAT, but just to assist us, that Allah is not composed of parts, components. And when we say parts, we mean body parts or organs or limbs or anything else, or atoms or cells, or however you compose things that we think of in the material world. Anything that you can think of, anything, whatever you are thinking of, it would be composed of parts. Even if you want to go to the very basic unit of what exists at our level, then everything is composed of atoms. We've covered that in previous sessions. Everything in creation is composed of atoms. But Allah is not composed of any substance, whether it is visible or non-visible. And Allah is not composed of different components or limbs or organs. Allah cannot be divided into different parts and pieces, and together it forms Allah. Nothing forms Allah because Allah is not composed of more than one piece or more than one part. I didn't put up the slide, eh? If we say Allah is not composed of parts or components, and Allah is not divisible, then that actually ties in with our understanding when we say Allah is one. Allah is not one made up of different parts. Allah is one that's indivisible, and everything about Allah it's what we refer to as the unity, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the things that belong to Allah, the names, the attributes, and the actions of Allah does not exist separately from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not something that you can say, there's a name that exists there, and there's that name, and that's that name, and that name, and there's Allah. No. All of them belong to one entity, and that entity is the one that we believe in and that we worship. So Allah is indivisible and inseparable from all those things that belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Please forgive me, I think I'm getting the flu. Now there are four, we said there are 20 essential sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these four categories. We'll quickly go to the categories. The first category refers to the divine being itself, the essence. And there's only one. This category, although it's called a category, has only one sifat. It is the self-attribute, that which relates or describes the self of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not a quality like the names and the attributes and so on. It's not a quality or an ability. It is the actual divine essence itself. I can't say much more than that. That's the one. Then there are 5 negating attributes, which are called the salbiya, nafsiya, that which relates to the self. Salbiya are the attributes, there's 5 of them, which negates unbefitting qualities or concepts. When we say negates, it denies or refutes or disallows certain concepts which we can never apply or describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with. We'll come to each category individually. Then there are 7 qualitative attributes. I think the heading says itself. These are the 7 specific qualities, the attributes of Manie, which describes certain divine actions, abilities, and qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll come to those. And the 7 affirmative ones, they affirm the 7 up here. So in other words, these are the qualities and abilities. The next one, ma'anawiya, are the also 7. They just confirm the top, that Allah doesn't only have those abilities. It actually describes that the 7 affirmative attributes are attributes of action, actions of these. So it sounds almost similar when we deal with it, and at the time we'll go into it. Now, this slide might sound as if it's a bit technical, and big words have been used, but as we go through it, just remember there's 4 categories. The first one has to do with the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala itself, the divine being. Then the other attributes describes things about the divine being itself. Now this is the last slide for tonight, which we just quickly going to touch on. Now, when we say exist, existence means that which it's so difficult to find a word to describe what existence is. That which is alive, that which is. Now, if we talk about the different types of existence, there's existence which is possible. It may or may not exist. It's possible for it to exist. If you take a human being, for example, is it compulsory for a human being to exist? Or you as a person? No. You may or may not exist. It depends on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it depends, that which may or may not exist is waiting on an external cause and an external source a creator or a determiner for it to come into existence. So anything that's possible, anything that is possible means everything in creation is possible. It's not compulsory for it to exist because it's waiting on an external trigger for it to come into existence. Because at the time when it's not existing, just before it starts existing, just before that, it was non-existent. So everything in creation is preceded by a state of non-existence. So everything in the entire creation, there was a point at which it did not exist. So that is possible existence, or as in Sheikh's book, the word conceivable is used. Necessary, non-existent. That is just a fancy way of saying it's impossible for it to exist. It cannot exist ever now or in the future. And here I just used an example of, for example, is it possible for another God or a partner to exist? In other words, say Allah exists, is it possible for Allah to create another God or a partner? That's not possible. And the proof, one can go through the proofs of it and explaining it. For example, Allah's created another God. God number one says it must rain. God number two say no, the sun must shine. Whose will takes precedence over the other? It will result in utter chaos. That would be number one. But if we say another God, the God must have the same qualities as the previous God. But if God cannot be created, then it means that the second God was waiting for it to be brought into existence and relied on a creator. Can you understand? That it's not possible for certain forms of existence to emerge. So that kind of existence is utterly and totally impossible. And they are referred to as the category that falls into its wajib, that they are non-existent, the things that would fall under this category. And this is a necessary existence, wajib, that which must exist in the past, present, and future. Now, when we say it must exist, then it means that there's no other option but for it to be there. It has to be there. Because if that was not there, then nothing else would exist. Because everything else in existence is waiting on the one who is eternal, the one who has no beginning and no end, and who has not been created, to bring the rest of the creation into existence. That is referred to as the necessary existence, wajib. And we're going to deal with that in a less technical way, inshallah. And that which is wajib, that existence which is wajib, should be above any need, condition, trigger, or prerequisite. There should, that existence of that one, of the wajib existence, cannot be subjected to any form of need. It can't wait on another trigger or rely on something to happen before it can exist. It exists eternally, as we said here. it must exist without any beginning or end before anything else was in existence. And no condition ever applies to the one that is necessary existent. And of course, the necessary existent must be self-sufficient. Self-sufficient means there's no external reliance on anything or anyone under any circumstances, past, present, future. And that necessary existence, the WAJIB existence, must possess unqualified and limitless, utter and total perfection. Now, we're going to end our tonight's discussion on that note, because now we're going to come to the first SIFAAT after this. I'll just show you what the first SIFAAT is, so that you know what we're talking about. Wujud, al-wujud, the existent, the one who exists. Taking all the other points, now we're talking about Allah now, right? And the existence of Allah. When we say Allah exists, how do we prove Allah exists? What is Allah? How did Allah come into existence? If Allah exists, and who brought Allah into existence? All of those questions and things can now be put on the table. And I hope people will actually do that. But that is next week. For now, we've basically laid the foundation now to grapple with the actual SIFAAT, the 20 SIFAAT, and inshallah, with this background, and it took a bit of time to get to this point, to lay the foundation, so that we're not going to go in and not understand on what we are basing what is to follow here. And if we have to come to some of these things again, then please don't be afraid to say we must refer back to this point and discuss this point. But Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Allah has granted us the opportunity to have at least covered this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability and the umar to continue with this and to leave this process with a better understanding of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. It's been a little bit technical, yes, I agree. Inshallah, it will become, hopefully, a bit more easier to follow and understand. But I'm going to now open the floor for any questions or comments, and I hope people will participate and ask questions. The floor is open.
Salie, the names of Allah, can one say, if you say Al-Jabbar, that makes it a name. But if you say, if you're saying Allah, a quality like knows, Allah knows, then that is an attribute. But if you say Al in front, then you're giving Allah that attribute, then a name, Allah's name.
Yes, Al means the one who hears, the one who sees, whatever. But that is a specific quality and a specific description. If you say that is Allah, for example, Allah, the all-seeing, that is Allah. Then what is all-knowing, Al-Alim? Is that also Allah? You see where the danger comes in? That you cannot say that is Allah. That is a name of Allah. It's like when we spoke about the tree, is the leaf the tree? Can we say that leaf, there you take the leaf off the tree and you say, this is the tree. In the same way, we cannot take the names out separately and refer to it as Allah. The names all belong to Allah, and the names are merely names. It's descriptions that describe certain things about Allah, but we cannot say that the name is actually Allah. But you can call on Allah by that name. Oh, Ya Alim, open our hearts so that we can actually taste your knowledge. You refer to that specific quality and ability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't know if that covers your question, Sister Aisha. If it's not, don't be scared to say not really, so that I can give the right answer. And if I can't, I'll say I don't know, and then we can go look for the answer.
Like that, you have the tree and then you have parts of the tree. The leaves and the branches are the parts.
Yes.
The tree is the essence.
Yeah. But in the case of the tree, the tree is composed, made up of the leaves, the trunk, the roots, and whatever else. Whereas in Allah's case, we said Allah is not composed and made up of parts. Allah is one. So Allah cannot be divided. You can describe qualities of Allah, but it cannot be seen as dividing Allah into all of these different abilities. Do you understand? Still not?
May I attempt something and also just clarify maybe for myself to inshallah? When we say Al-Alim, it means the most knowledgeable. So only Allah can be the most. So when we say Al, we mean the most, the ultimate. But when we say Ya Allah, we appealing to Allah in whatever attribute we are referring to. But when we say Al, it means the ultimate, the source. And it cannot, the ultimate source cannot belong to anybody else, but there are people who can see. So when we say Al-Basir, the all-seeing, but others can see too. So Al means giving Allah the ultimate oneness or unity of that ability. I don't know if I'm on the right track.
So are you saying, when you say Al, that you can say Al-Alim because you're saying Al? Al is definitive. Al means that makes it specific. The one who has all knowledge, that is Allah. Can we say that is Allah?
When we say Al, then it means that aspect that we're talking about, the ultimate, the one who is ultimately capable of, that is Allah, but doesn't mean it. Allah is only capable of that, but Allah is the ultimate of that particular quality.
Are you then not describing the name of what that name means rather than describing Allah? Can you say the name is Allah?
We can never say the name is Allah, because then it means it's limiting only to that quality. But when we say all-knowing, Allah is the only one who is all-knowing.
Yes, when we say Al-Alim, then that quality, in any case, we said no other entity can share in Allah's attributes. That's part of the oneness of our Tawhid. We believe only Allah has those qualities. So when we describe Allah through His names or His attributes, none other can have that. But can we say that that quality is Allah? No. Allah is Allah. We can call Allah by Ya Alim, Ya Mujib, Ya Razak, Ya Nur, Ya Salam. All these names we can use to appeal to Allah, to address Allah. But we can never say that that is actually Allah, because then you are limiting Allah. So as long as we are clear about that we never fall in the trap, of course you can't go and discuss that, this point with anyone who doesn't understand, when has not followed what we have said prior to this. If you were to say to somebody else, another person, you can't say, Ya Khalik is Allah. Then that person will say you kufr. And he would probably, from where he is standing, be right to say that in his understanding, because you are denying, as far as he is concerned or she is concerned, that Allah is not the creator. So we must be careful what we do with this knowledge. Please use it with full understanding, and don't go even try to grandstand or show, because it's difficult concepts to explain. It's not easy to explain. I told you last week, what you should do is go take all of what you have learned, hopefully, yeah, and go stand in the mirror and explain it to yourself and ask yourself, do you understand it correctly? The problem is, if you go to the mirror and you explain something to yourself, and the mirror starts answering you, then you're not going to know how to answer. You should actually change places. You are now asking the question, then you stand where the mirror is and you give an answer, and then you go back to standing in front of the mirror, and then you react and engage with yourself. But what if? What if? So these things are not going to be easy, but I'm glad we're engaging with the issue, because those are exactly the kinds of things that if we don't understand it correctly, then the understanding further on is going to become a bit shaky. But I don't know, Sister Warda, if that has covered you, the response that I gave.
Yes.
Alhamdulillah.
Of course, nothing is, it's just that we can never say Allah is only that. If the only if it's restricted, then it's not Allah. Then it's not a quality. Yeah, then it's not Allah.
Allah has no limitations. You can't limit Allah. Only, even there, one can go and have debates and discussions, because it depends what we say and what we mean. But at the general level, you can't say Allah is only Al-Alim or only this 20 sifats. That's Allah and nothing else. And his 99 names, nothing else is Allah. You can't say that. Then you are limiting Allah based on your limitations. Your limitations of what you know. You are saying Allah is limited to what you know. Any final question or comment? If not, then I think we've come to the end tonight, and I want to thank everyone for participating. It's been maybe a bit technical, a bit difficult, because we are laying the foundation on which we have to build things that hopefully will be easier to explain once we understand that. But it would be good for you to go over these things on your own, inshallah. Go over it on your own. And grapple with these issues and see if you are able to explain it to yourself. And if you don't, go listen to the YouTube again of what was said. And if you're still not clear, then please feel free to raise the questions at the beginning of our next session. or as I've said to you last week, if you don't feel comfortable in doing that, I've given you my cell phone number last week. If you want to contact me directly, please feel absolutely free to do so. We're going to, inshallah, then come to the end now. And let me just see, I see Muhammad Fasih has joined us. I want to give him the barakah of making dua for us. Muhammad Fasih, make dua for us. We're going to conclude our session now on this note, inshallah. Muhammad Fasih, are you with us? Okay, he's not here. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم اللهم إنك عفو كريم من تحب العفو فاعف عنا. Ya Allah, you are the only one who can forgive. You want to forgive us. All we have to do is turn towards you, Ya Allah. You are waiting for us to turn to you. We ask and we plead with you, Ya Allah. Forgive us for all our shortcomings, our weaknesses, our ignorance, our negligence. Forgive us for those things, Ya Allah. We have full trust in you because that is one of your SIFAAT, one of your names. You are the forgiver, Ya Allah, and your forgiveness and your mercy has absolutely no limits. Nothing about you has any limits, like your mercy has no limits. Ya Allah, we ask and we plead with you to be merciful towards us, towards our children, our spouses, our parents, our grandparents, and everyone, whether we know them, our friends, our family, whether we know them well or whether we don't know them, and the Muslim Ummah at large. Please shower your mercy and your rahmah and your kindness and your generosity and your rizq on all of us, O Ya Allah. Let us not be of those who will one day stand in front of you with our heads bowed low and be put on the stand knowing that we have not done what we could have done. Make us strong, not only in these sessions, Ya Allah, but wherever we find ourselves in our lives, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, guide us, make us strong, give us firm conviction and iman, Ya Allah, so that we can get closer to you, so that we can earn your love, Ya Allah. Make us of those people that you are pleased with, and also our family, and especially our young ones, the young people, guide them, Ya Allah. They are going through very, very, very difficult times. Times are changing so fast. We as the older generation, we have no idea what the young people are going through. Ya Allah, give them the ability, the strength, the intellect and iman. Couple those two things for them so that they can withstand the onslaughts again, our deen, and let them be the ones who will be able to protect and project the interests of Islam, and be the ones who will be able to set a living example of what it is to be a true practicing Muslim. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Let's just recite Al-Fatiha together. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحياتهم فيها سلام وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. Just in conclusion, I just want to leave a small bit of advice to all of us. I include myself in this, that we should all go back to Suratul Ikhlas, Qul Wallahu Ahad. Read it read it with new understanding, and try and extract a new meaning of why Allah has made this such an elevated verse, and go back to Surah Al-Fatiha. Go back to the Fatiha. Start from the beginning. Start from the beginning and go through every verse and try and understand it better. And inshallah, those are two great, great, great gifts that has been given to this ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's lots of benefits in there, and we have taken it for granted. May Allah give us the hidayah to understand, the ability to understand it better and to practice it in our lives. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.